Okay, so as I was researching the Amon Green stuff, I realized, there's been a lot of Batman coding we've talked about and dealing with Super Bowl 50. It also ties into Superman versus Batman, and this movie comes out 47 days after Super Bowl 50. But I realized that I'd never really looked that much into Superman. I've only been covering a lot of Batman, and partially because I've never really watched Superman. I don't know that much about Superman other than kryptonite kills him. I mean, really, like, I just never really watched it, so. Anyway, somehow I remembered watching a YouTube video, or maybe I had watched a part of this movie somewhere, but in the movie Superman Returns, I remember that he saves an airplane from crashing into the baseball stadium. And I know it's a baseball stadium, but it's still interesting that Superman would save an airplane crashing into any type of sporting event. And I'll explain why here in a second, but so I notice in this baseball game, nobody in the crowd notices that the plane is coming down crashing until number 27 pops the ball up here. 27 equals 46. We've talked a lot about how it's coded to the Chicago Bears. Chicago equals 46. They won the Super Bowl the same year that the Kansas City Royals won the World Series in 1985. They won it 91 days later. Back to the Future seems to be super coded to all this as well. But also Super Bowl 50 is on 2-7, kind of like 27, so interesting he would pop the ball up and everyone would notice this plane going to crash into the stadium or whatever. But the reason that this struck my brain was because in 2015 we got these stories about the lights at Levi's Stadium are blinding pilots. So it just made me wonder if if a plane is somehow going to crash into the stadium. I mean, not saying it's going to happen, not trying to scare people, but they do a lot and a lot of coding, and I mean, it's just interesting, I guess. Something to watch out for. And it was also these stories were also read around the time that Pope Francis came to the United States. I don't know when the exact first one was, but this one on 49ersNation.com was from September 23rd. Remember Pope Francis went to the White House at 9:23 on this day, 9:23, the 266 days, the 266th Pope. He came to America the day before on his 923rd day as Pope. Um, but in the article they mentioned blinding. Blinding equals 71, just like Super Bowl 50. The other one says, or I just typed in blinded, I guess. It doesn't say it, but blinded. The pilots were blinded. 32 and 50. Super Bowl 50. 32 when you write it out equals 50. Also interesting, the 32nd prime just so happens to be 131. If you write out the word Super Bowl, it adds up to 131. And I just wrote out airplane crashes into Super Bowl 50. The gematria of that is 161 and 404. Just really interesting numbers considering the Civil War, black versus white, racial, domestic violence type theme that they've been running for a long time now. But American Civil War equals 161. It even started in 1861. Obama was born in 1961. Lots of stuff with that as well. 34 and 43 are connected to Civil War a lot. If you write out 34, it adds up to 61. But also, it's the Black Panthers versus the White Broncos. And also, this is St. Francis of Assisi's real name. His name adds up to 161. He's the first guy who ever got the stigmata. But Pope Francis and San Francisco are both named after him. Also, in regards to earthquakes, the last big East Coast earthquake, the biggest last East Coast earthquake, was in Mineral, Virginia. That adds up to 161. It was a 5.8. The one before it was in 1944. It was also a 5.8. And the biggest one ever recorded on the East Coast was in Charleston, where the Civil War began. And it was 58 years and 5 days before the one in 1944. Remember, Obama's the 44th president. If you write out the word 44, it adds up to 144, which connects to the number 71, because if you write out 71, it adds up to 144. There are lots of Moses coding. I know it seems like a lot, but there's really a lot that all comes together in this coding, and it's crazy. But we just had the death of Grizzly Adams equals 161. I talked about him in the movie Happy Gilmore and how it's all coded to earthquakes. If you go back and I have a post on it here on the blog or whatever, and I think I also made a video on that as well. So check that out. Lots of interesting stuff dealing with earthquake. Also, 161 days, uh, not always, but sometimes is 5 months and 8 days, kind of like 58. Lincoln even died 161 days before 923. Michael J. Fox's real middle name is Andrew. Michael Andrew Fox equals 161. Lots of stuff with his movies have been coded. You know, and interesting too, I've talked about Space Jam. Space Jam is Michael Jordan, it's MJ. Michael J. Fox is MJ. There's even Michael Jackson stuff. Michael Jackson is MJ. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, MJ is 23. Maybe it's something to do with 23. But in Pythagorean gematria, MJ would be M would be the fourth letter, so and then J would be 1, so it'd be like 41. Super Bowl adds up to 41. Also, I guess Pope Francis arrived in the U.S. at 4:04 p.m. on his 923rd day, and like I said, he went to the White House at 9:23 on 9:23. There's 404 verses in Revelation. The King James Bible even came out 404 years ago on 5/2, so it'll be 405 on 5/2 of this year. Also in the Superman movie, it even involves a blackout of the East Coast, which that's what causes the plane to mess up in the air, and then it's going to crash into the baseball stadium. So there's a blackout on the East Coast. Luther steals Kryptonian crystals, and he uses them for an experiment that causes a mass power outage on the East Coast. I've talked a lot about the East Coast stuff with earthquakes, so just really stuck out to me. Unbelievable to me that was even in the movie. Batman vs Superman even came out it's coming out 47 days after Super Bowl 50. It's also the 85th day of the year, a number that's tied in with earthquakes again. But remember in Super Bowl 47, that was the Blackout Super Bowl. Beyonce performed at Super Bowl 47, and now she's performing with Coldplay this year. And, just interesting dealing with blackout. There was also a blackout at the White House in 2015 on 4/7. And then in the World Series, we had the TV blackout, and it came back on after the 47th pitch. I also found this article about the 1985 Chicago Bears. They finally got to visit the White House 25 years after winning the Super Bowl in 1986. But they went to the White House on 10/7 of 2011. Interesting, 107. Superman equals 107. Earthquake adds up to 107. They couldn't come in 1986, though. Challenger, the space shuttle Challenger, exploded or whatever. So, I mean, just super interesting. Superman, when the blackout happens, and the reason the plane crashes is because the plane they're doing like a test thing, and they put a space shuttle on top of this airplane to like give it a boost to outer space, I believe is what's going on. And then when the power goes out, it jams the space shuttle, and it gets it stuck onto the airplane, and then the boosters go off connected to the airplane, and that's why Superman has to go save the airplane from crashing into the baseball stadium. So interesting, the Chicago Bears couldn't visit the White House in 86 because of a space shuttle disaster, and the same thing happens in the Superman movie, and it was all caused by a blackout. And I want to show you a little clip of this movie. I'm going to turn the volume off so I don't get a copyright strike, but it actually involves earthquake and a train wreck as well. So Lex Luthor is the reason that the blackout happens, because he's doing this thing with crystals and whatnot. Lots of interesting things if you watch this movie and some of the things they say, but I'll put it in full screen so hopefully you can read the captions, and you can see the earthquake, the train wreck, and whatnot. It's just super interesting. You had the train wreck in Philadelphia, that happened at 9:23 p.m. I've covered a lot of that. All these buildings falling, the rocks fall and take the train off the track. We had the train wreck in Vermont in 2015 because of the falling rocks or whatever. And then this is all because of an earthquake, and everything just like explodes and whatnot. This really makes you think here. So anyway, also if you go from the date that the Bears went to the White House and you go to Super Bowl 50 this year, it's a span of 4 years and 4 months, right? And Obama invited them to the White House. 44 is just a number connected to assassination of presidents. So even the first president to die in office died on April 4th, 4-4. Martin Luther King Jr. died on 4-4. Lots of interesting things with that, but 10-7, similar to 107, like I said, earthquake equals 107, Superman equals 107. If you write out 107, it equals 131, just like the word Super Bowl. Blackout even equals 85, just like the 85 Bears. Also, the Challenger disaster happened on 1/28, so 2 days after the 86 Super Bowl. It happened 73 seconds after takeoff. It had this teacher, the first teacher, she would have been the first teacher in space. She was 37 when she died. Her name adds up to 73. Carolina equals 73 and 37. Challenger equals 85. It also reminds me, for whatever reason, of the German Wings flight with Andreas Lubitz, the guy who purposely crashed the plane in France or whatever, and it was on 3/24 of 2015. 3/24, normally, last year it was the 83rd day of the year. Football equals 83. This year it'll be the 84th day. Obama equals 84 in Jewish gematria. He was born on August 4th, 8-4. But anyway, in this crash here, we got the picture here of this guy. This is the only picture they put up in the articles. Now, he's not even from San Francisco, nothing to do with San Francisco. In these articles, they put a picture of him up at the Golden Gate Bridge. His name is Andreas Lubitz, right? The San Andreas Fault. They give him a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. There's also 144 passengers on here. Remember, 44 equals 144. 71 equals 144. Super Bowl 50 equals 144. Talked a lot about the Moses connections to it. 10 Commandments equals 71. Moses equals 71. Moses was in the tribe of Levi. It's Levi's stadium. Even says the descent time from 38,000 feet was about 10 minutes. So they left its assigned cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. And 38 is just connected. The Super Bowl 50 is on the 38th day of the year. Colorado adds up to 38 and 83. It's the 38th state. Panthers equals 38. It even says that it dropped 58 feet per second, or 34,000 feet per minute. German Wings equals 58. Once again, the number connected to earthquake, the mirror of 85. It was also the worst French air crash in 34 years. 34,000. They had to put that in the article. Lubitz was even 27 years old. 38 weeks and 3 days. Just interesting. The 38 again. The Super Bowl's on 2/7. Also, the day that it happened just so happened to be Peyton Manning's 39th birthday, the 83rd day of the year. So who knows? I want to look a little bit more into Superman if I have time. I'm really not even, I don't watch superhero movies, never been into it, but they always seem to be just so ridiculously coded. Lots of stuff is always coded to the superhero movies. So anybody out there who knows a lot about the superhero stuff, I'm sure you could help out a lot with a lot of this coding. So I just really don't want to sit and watch all these movies. It'll just take way too long. But whatever, I'm going to leave it at that. Got a whole bunch more posts that I wanted to post, so have a good night.